The views and opinions expressed by the guests of the Inspira Podcast do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of any agency of the United States government or any organization, public or private.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Inspira Podcast, hosted by your girl, me, Erika Mueller Chen. I'm an international development specialist with over a decade of experience leveraging the amazing power of sport to promote peace and positive social impact. My career has allowed me to live in Europe, Southern Africa, and Latin America. In 2022, I accepted an offer for my dream job in sports diplomacy. And I also became an employee family member to a U.S. diplomat, aka an EFM. This podcast is all about inspiration and career advice. Each episode, I'll interview an inspirational global changemaker working in sport for development, social impact, or the diplomatic service. This series is perfect if you have interest in breaking into one of these sectors, or you've already landed that dream role and are keen to learn from thought leaders. Enjoy today's episode and stay inspired.
We felt that as an organization, we didn't have the right to reinforce the prejudice, the public perception that a blind person or someone with disabilities would need help or would be a beggar on the streets.
Welcome, friends. Today's special guest is Gabriel Mayr. Gabriel is a Brazilian physical education teacher who has worked with Sport for Development and Peace since the first year of university. Working with the Rio de Janeiro blind soccer team allowed him to learn about Paralympic sports and ultimately led Gabriel to co-found Erika Sports and Culture for the Blind, an NGO that promoted several pioneer projects in Brazil, including the first female blind soccer team and the audio descriptive commentary at the 2014 FIFA World Cup. Gabriel has gathered additional experiences internationally, including earning his master's in adapted physical activity in Belgium and Czech Republic. He was also selected to participate in the U.S. Department of State Global Sports Mentorship Program, and he's worked in Ireland with the UNESCO chair, as well as the United Nations in New York City. So his resume is stacked. I'm really excited to talk to you, Gabriel, about all of your experiences. So welcome to the podcast. How are you today, and where are you calling us from?
Hello, Erika. Hello to everyone listening to this podcast. I'm speaking from São Paulo in Brazil. It's not my hometown. I'm from Rio de Janeiro originally, but since I moved back from Ireland in 2019, I'm living in São Paulo, a huge city.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I like to start our conversation before the questions, just mentioning why you inspire me, Gabriel. And this will be related to how we met, because you and I had the opportunity to meet back in 2015 or 2016, right before the 2016 Rio Paralympic Games. You inspire me because of the work that you've done in adaptive and inclusive sport, including creating an NGO that has really done so many firsts in Brazil for people with physical disabilities. And I was lucky to see some of that in action, because when we met, you and I were teaming up along with other thought leaders in this space to equip sports coaches and teachers in Brazil on what to keep in mind when working with people with physical disabilities, especially individuals who may be blind. So I think you're quite inspirational, and the work that you've done is so important, and I'm really excited to learn from you today.
Oh, thank you. The work I was doing at the time at Erika, it was very exciting to do in a daily life. The routine was amazing because we had loads of bureaucratic job, loads of tedious tasks to do, but dealing with the guys, with the beneficiaries, the athletes, it was amazing to feel that every spreadsheet was counting towards changing lives, and if I say more than changing lives, giving platform for people to change their lives or providing opportunities. So to have this in a daily routine was something very special because, as we'll talk later on, I I started to work with global projects and with policies and so on. So you are not fortunate enough to be close to people and to see people benefiting directly from the work. So at that time was a very special time in my life.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting just how it felt to be in that moment. And of course, we'll get into your founder story in a few moments from now. But just that idea, I think, resonates with a lot of people that when you're closer to the impact, you can just feel so much more attached to this work in sport for development and peace. But that the aspirations that you may have, I may have, is to move up in our careers. And sometimes moving up, you get separated from the beneficiaries, separated from the sport. And so I'm excited to know more about that trajectory for you. So maybe to start things off, I would love it, Gabrielle, if you can just give us a brief overview of what your career journey has been and maybe any moments where you decided to focus on sport for social impact and specifically sport for individuals with disabilities.
Well, I'm a Brazilian, born in Rio de Janeiro, and as the cliche goes, I wanted to be a football or soccer player, and I was pretty beyond average, and I had the opportunity to play to at some youth squads of big team. I was invited to actually, but because of the school time and arrangements, I couldn't go there, and it was a frustration. That when I was looking for university, I wanted to do physical education, so to work with football and to kind of fulfill the dream that I couldn't do as a player. But funny enough, on my first semester of the university, two friends who studied with me in the school, they are blind and they were playing at the Rio de Janeiro team of blind football, and they needed a goalkeeper. The goalkeeper is sighted. So they said, look, you're studying at night, so in the afternoons you're free, so please come just to help us on the training. Like we have a one goalkeeper, so he's going to the tournaments, but we need someone for the trainings, for the practices, so we can have matches. Then I went there, and very soon it was clear that I was a terrible goalkeeper. But apparently people liked me, so they didn't tell me to go away. And also at the time, the National Federation of the Blind, they were hosting some chess tournaments for the chess for the blind tournaments in this institute in Rio. So I was helping them to organize the tournaments, and I was always a bit geeky. And think it was 2001, and I was making a small website with live results from the chess tournament. And this was groundbreaking at the time
Yeah.
because it was expensive to call to mobile phones and so on, and people would know the results 2 days after the federation started to like my work and to invite me to other tournaments on goalball, blind football, and so on. And I started to invite people from my university to help on the to volunteer in tournaments as well. And 2004, a few years later, I was invited by this national federation to go to Greece to an exchange, a blind football exchange. The Brazilian crew had to do a blind football training session for all departments. And this guy who was the coach said, "Look, please do the training because I don't know how to do a blind football training session." I did so, and one of the boys from England loved it, and he started talking a lot about me in this session. That was when he best learned and practiced blind football in his life, and he got very close to me, and I barely could speak English at the time. And in the last day, his teacher, his coach, was asked me if I wanted to move for a year to England to work with the English national team of blind football. But as I wouldn't have the visa and the time, they wouldn't hire me. That I could go as a volunteer at the biggest college for the blind in the UK. So I went there after finishing the university, um, to spend this to have this experience, and was being in one of the biggest college for the blind in the world, and knowing about technology where they develop technologies that we would only dream of seeing here in Brazil. So they started to give me a very wide international perspective on my work, and starting to connect to people, and trying to find solutions that they had in England, adapt and bring to Brazil.
So it sounds like this was the beginning of Yoresi. How did that happen? How did you create this organization?
At the same time, I was with some colleagues, some athletes, and some classmates, and some other young teachers. We were founding Uresi. I did just before going to England. I did an entrepreneurship course to learn how to open an organization. So I just wanted to know how to register, to have the formal number of the NGO, and I ended up leaving this program with a business plan, which no other organization had at the time. And Uresi always was thinking that as an organization, first, that our dream of sport inclusion and so on was not the dream of a businessman, of a company, or whoever would support us. So we couldn't sell our dream. So please support us because we are doing inclusion. We understood very early that in this process, talking to classmates on these entrepreneurship courses that had for-profit companies and projects, that we needed to find ways that they could benefit in their passion, that was making money. So before having any activity, having any beneficiary, any athlete, we had at the time the best website in Portuguese language about sports for the blind. So having this website, we had the credibility to start to have the first sponsorship. We felt that as an organization, we had we didn't have the right to reinforce the prejudice and the public perception that a blind person or someone with disabilities would need help, or would be a beggar on the street. So us as an organization, we would never beg for money. So we would find a project that would be appealing, that we having a good connection with media, being well prepared to work with the media, we would have more opportunities on the media, so we could sell not our dream, but we could sell that we consistently are appearing on the media. So if you support us, you are going to appear in a spontaneous way in the media, in a positive way, not paying for an advert. And this would be the biggest asset that we had. And when organizations, the companies wanted just to help the blind, us as an organization, we had the strong position of not accepting that. We didn't want help. We wanted to have partners, and in this way build something together that would fit our goals or dreams, but also would not reinforce any prejudice about disabilities. So this was really great, and I think that was a very unique perspective of dealing with disabilities, dealing uh, in social in sports for social change in general.
I'm curious, in addition to those website sponsorships, how did you secure funding to stay afloat?
We started to have too many beneficiaries, and we didn't have enough income, and people were looking for us to, because they wanted to be part of our programs, and we almost closed the doors because we didn't have enough money. So I went back to this entrepreneurship course. We did a new business plan, and then working towards the social business model. So we started to, on top of that we did and having the sponsorships, we started to produce braille menus for hotels, for restaurants and bars. So in doing this process, we would hire the athletes to do the braille, to do the conversion, to print out, to deliver, to sell. So in this way, the organization had more income and not an income that had a specific destination. We could use this money in any way. So flexibility that is very rare for the third sector. We would have those athletes being trained to work, so they would have a better qualification, and they had a better payment in a way because the rates for selling were way bigger than any other job, and we would have the city more accessible as well. So we could find a way that in a triangle would have the organization more sustainable, the beneficiaries having a better payment and qualification, and the city also more accessible with more braille menus in restaurants and everywhere.
It sounds like you were really going across sectors and missions in terms of sport for development, social enterprise, sustainability, human rights, inclusion, a whole menu of social impact. Is that what you knew at the time?
So I think that we were always with the feet at the third sector, at the sports for development sector, perhaps the feet in the sports for development sector. But even though in the beginning we didn't know that, we thought that we did only did sports for the blind only competitions. Later on, that we understood that we were dealing with human rights and so on. But we're with the feet there, but looking at the third sector in general, but also outside. So always trying to find partnerships, always trying to have disabilities as something transversal that would go would fit other discussions, other tables, if you call. So yeah, I think that this perhaps explanation how Oresi came to be what it is now.
Thank you, Gabriel, for sharing that. And I tried to take so many notes when you were speaking because you were mentioning just what you were learning and adapting at the time, which I feel is so helpful for people listening. I'll try to pull out a few things that I jotted down. One was about the strength of your technology skills, building a really strong website, kind of signaling that professionalization of what you were doing. You also approach things with what I consider to be a strength based approach. You mentioned not wanting to perpetuate what some other organizations or people may be doing in terms of fundraising to say, hey, I need help. Instead, you're saying, hey, like, I don't necessarily need help. Like, this is what we're doing. If you want to support it, support it. It's important work, which I think is so important. And as you said, in order to not reinforce prejudice against people who are blind or people with physical disabilities. And then what you just finished with, talking about a social business model, adapting the business model you had already created, which to start with, you mentioned was unique, was a differentiating factor to allow you to succeed, and then revamping it, thinking about social business, thinking about how to partner with hotels and utilize the athlete's strength and skills in Braille and understanding different methods of communication that could benefit businesses. So those are just some things that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I think that one thing that sports and being part of competitions helped us is that we could connect with a lot of people nationally and abroad, and always with this perspective of looking at everyone and trying to be kind of a big dish antenna, trying to absorb everything and see how we can apply to our model, to our business. And of course, then all the margins improved, and then we would have more money to do activities and to invest. So I think that always learning about how the process go and adapting, as you said, like working with people with disabilities, you learn to adapt in all, as the world is not made for whoever is not fitting a specific target group, and everybody else adapts. I think perhaps people with disabilities have to adapt even more. So we take this knowledge and apply. Even though I'm speaking in this way, but myself, I do not have a disability. When I say we, the organization with like the president and loads of athletes taking part of the decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, I think what you just said is so profound, right? The reality that people who live in a society where it's not designed to serve them, and that does include people with disabilities. And I just want to zoom into one more topic before we kind of think about the wider sector of sport for development and peace. It sounds like with Yoresi, you've secured so many impressive partnerships. Are there any reasons that you attribute that success to? I mean, you mentioned a few things in terms of your goals were really clear, your communications were clear, your value was clear. Are there any other things that you think allowed you to get into those right spaces, or those spaces where people could really team up and elevate the impact that you and Oresi had?
Well, I think that I had the opportunity to live, as I said, in England, and then I had a scholarship from the European Union to do my master's. So these were 2 years living in three different countries in Europe. So this started to show me that there were many differences in and how things were said and done in the global north and south. So many things that were expected to happen in the global north are not part of the culture, are not part of the way things happen in the global south. And due to the power balance, these sometimes seems like one is right and the other is wrong. I don't believe that. I think that they're different, and trying to move between those two realities is something that I think that my experience helped, because sometimes if I would say in the same way to someone in the Brazilian government and in a foreign government, if I say the same sentence, if I send the same email, in one place I would look very out of touch, and in the other side I would be not professional at all. So sometimes trying to dance a bit, and it's always tricky, and uh, you always feel like a colorblind chameleon. So you never know if you're blending correctly. You know that you can adapt, but you never know if you're in the right color and in the right moment. So I think that being able at least to know other shades of colors and ways to speak and what is expected, and having connections around, it helped us to connect. We started to during the World Cup and Olympic and Paralympic Games in Brazil and in Rio in particular. We found a niche of speaking to foreign governments that were looking for projects to support. And then we were showing ourselves as a project that could have dialogues, who was able to understand the needs on monitoring and evaluations, for instance, or the amount of forms, and many projects is of putting for many projects in Brazil to, and I believe in the global south, just to cope with the forms to apply for a project that are pretty standard in the global north. So I think that many times I could understand what partners needed and dialogue with that, and sometimes just be more clear on why wouldn't be possible to fulfill some requests or some need. So being able to understand a bit better and transit between both sides, I think it helped. So being a bit closer is finding there was we had the mega events in Rio, so uh, many windows of opportunities appeared. We found a niche, and many times it was easier to fight for money for projects in this space that not everyone was ready to dispute here in Brazil.
Quick break here to highlight what I consider to be a fabulous resource that I've created for any listeners out there interested in learning more about the sport for development and peace sector. You've come to the right place. In addition to Inspira Podcast episodes that you can listen to, I've created a written resource that you can read, which currently has over 90 items I've curated from my own experience and vetted with other experts in the field. These include databases to find award-winning organizations, links to reports, books, and research, as well as recommended newsletters and recorded webinars, all Sport for Dev related. I encourage you to have a look. You can find this resource by visiting my LinkTree, listed in each episode's show notes. Then clicking Erika's Global Resource Hub. That's right, Erika's Global Resource Hub. If you like what you read and what you hear, I'd love it if you could give Inspira a 5-star review on your chosen podcast platform and write a kind review. That would be so energizing for me, and it would help Inspira reach more ears. Thanks, and back to the show.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
So we worked with governments from the United States, from the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, and others, Germany as well. We did projects for FIFA, as you mentioned in the beginning of the show. So with FIFA, we did a new project, a new service. We had an audio descriptive commentary for fans at the stadium. So we could provide tickets for all the matches in Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, Brazilian, Minas Gerais, for people who would never, many of them wouldn't be able to attend the matches, and and if they did attend, they wouldn't have access to a service that was made for them. So it was an amazing experience to have a final, a FIFA final of the World Cup with a service specifically tailored for people with disabilities. As we said, that the world is not accessible, is not taught for someone with disabilities, or being there live at the World Cup final doing this project. We knew that this would support other projects for kids who would never, like, were not born perhaps on that time. They are now benefiting for an organization that is strong nowadays.
What a journey you've had, Gabriel. It's just, I'm learning so much. Wow. I'm really like in awe of all the things that you've done and the spaces that you've been able to navigate, right? Like you mentioned really candidly just now and with me in other conversations that it's it's not easy. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm gathering is that the experience being a global South citizen, navigating spaces in the United States, in Europe, in other places, you said it yourself, you felt like a colorblind chameleon. What do you hope to see in the future in terms of any changes the sport for development sector can make so that bridging south to north connections is a bit easier?
Well, I think that we can't just think about the sector. We don't think about the world and how the power dynamics are, because I think that this goes way beyond. And I think that many, like, we have the language barriers, we have uh, access barriers as well, like the biggest conferences, the meetings, they are usually based in Europe or in the US. So, like, just not being able to have a coffee after a meeting, it's always is already an impairment for someone from the global south who just video call to a meeting. So I think that we have many power dynamics that are in place, and we have a wider problem than just the sector. But I think that if you think about the power dynamics and the world as a whole, the sector is way better than what we face. Like, let's say, in if I when I'm working when I was working abroad and so on, I think that once I'm in the meeting, if I am giving the same opportunities, people in the sector tend to want to listen to someone from with a different perspective, but not always, and due to the constraints on budget and so on, not always. I think that the meetings, the tables are set in a way that you'll find a level playing field. So yeah, I know it's tough to find money for someone from Brazil or from Argentina or from Zambia to travel to be there because of the language barrier. Uh, you have the right expressions in English. So in this conversation, sometimes I'll say, speak 1 minute, and you have a concept. You have the name of the concept. That this is a challenge when you are not speaking your first language. But I think that getting all of this together for everyone to be in the table with the same tools, the same possibilities, and understanding that perhaps when I don't have the right concept name, or take 30 seconds to say something, doesn't mean that I know less than you, that you have on a click the right concept. We have to understand that the Eurocentric view of the international table not always is fair to everyone. So the more and more that we can adapt and go beyond that to understand people and to connect with people. This week we had a conversation that for me is very important to know beyond work, beyond the project of the podcast. How are you? How are you doing? And then all of those nuances get way clear in this conversation that we had. So for me, a way of dealing with that and to understand better where each one is coming from, and each conversation, each intervention is coming from, to try to connect with people beyond the coffee conversation, but try to understand the challenges, the motivations, and so on. So in the end, for me, I believe that having those better human connections, uh, makes everything else easier, because if I connect with someone, I can explain that I won't be able to do something, everything that I was saying before. But you're speaking with a trust background in that relation, and that I believe a lot.
Yeah, that human connection is so important, and it sounds like that's really allowed you to navigate those spaces with an ability to build rapport with people from different backgrounds, from the global south, from the global north. Of course, your first language is Portuguese, so that can be a strength in certain spaces. And as you mentioned, in other spaces, you might, again, I'm making an assumption here, you might be translating or figuring out, how to reconcile those different experiences. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that sometimes, like, if you like, I believe I speak a good English, so
You
people
do.
take for granted that you know way more than you do, but there's a constant process of thought, and to have like experiences from your youth, you have to translate and so on. So it's harder than,
Harder
but
than it looks or sounds. Well, Gabriel, shifting a little bit from your work at Oresi, your work in Brazil, I understand that during the COVID pandemic, you had a really interesting role with the United Nations, which through that experience, I'm wondering what you saw, what you felt about sport for development and peace, especially what new challenges came up during the pandemic that were facing the sector, and maybe your views now on what you see that could help SDP recover or bounce back better, if you think it can.
I was very fortunate after working at the UNESCO chair in Ireland and having a better knowledge of global documents and UN documents on human rights to do a couple of consultancies for UN DESA. So I was helping them to with some research about the field, and supporting as well on the organization of events. So we had one great event was a webinar about sports for people with disabilities and how the COVID pandemics were affecting the health and the access to physical activities for people with disabilities, which was a huge challenge because many of us we were doing exercises at home. We were using remote Zoom software or remote video conferencing to do exercises with teachers and so on. But people with disabilities, who many of them needing specific equipment, specific support to do activities and to maintain the fitness and health levels, they were struggling more than someone without disabilities. And this is something that was very clear in other events that we organized, because what we had with the pandemics is widening the digital divide. So as I said, many of us, myself, I'm someone from middle class in Brazil. I have access to computer, internet. I could do online lessons, classes, and many things. But for whoever didn't have access to internet, whoever didn't have access to a computer, being with the social distancing at home, it was meaning complete lack of access to services, to physical activity, and so on. So we had great conversations about creative uses of technology. So organizations providing a mobile phone, providing the internet access card to a teacher. If we think with one phone and one access to internet, we can reach dozens of classes instead of trying to give one mobile to each beneficiary. Also, but also thinking about how technologies can make, let's say, a blind person able to run alone in a track, or how technology can make prosthetics more affordable, or a ball that won't be destroyed as the one ball project. So how technology in different senses, not thinking only about computers, internet, can be used for the sector. So it's a challenge that we have to be aware, because when we promote our programs nowadays, many times we use social media, but people not always will have access. So here in Brazil, we have a tradition in some places, there's cars with huge speakers on the back. So perhaps you can talk about your program in this car, talking to the whole neighborhood that you have free classes of sport, and then you target everyone and many people who wouldn't see your Facebook post. Thinking about this and thinking how powerful a document made and a statement made from the UN can empower so many projects as Suresi is in Rio. So this power of the work in this level is amazing. So in the beginning, I was saying that you miss the daily life contact. You don't know the names of people who are benefiting of this, but on the other hand, you know that your work, like every comma and space that you type, is going everywhere in the world. So this feeling is very sometimes frightening in a way, because you want to do your best and want to always do a bit, take another step and go a bit further. But it's also very rewarding to think that there were few places that this could be done for the sector. So to feel that I'm helping to like not only be the dishwasher antenna in the past, but also helping people to throw things for other dishwashers antenna around the globe. This is an amazing feeling. And sometimes I'm writing and I think about Gabriel 10 years or 15 years ago, how I would receive that if it would be a language that was too off-putting, or how this would be applicable for me in Brazil with the challenges I had. So yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm very happy that I had this opportunity.
Mm. Gabriel, you are good with the metaphors. When you talked about feeling like a chameleon and then you mentioned the dishwasher, yeah, like your English is better than mine. I'm like, wow, you're creative. So I like that a lot. And I also just want to say that I feel like I could have a conversation with you about many different topics, right? Like we could have focused on technology, we could have focused on human rights, we could have focused on blind football, the global landscape. So I'm really appreciative that you're giving us a taste of each of these in the amount of time that we have today. And perhaps I can ask you for any special moments that you've had. You know, we've talked about challenges in the sector, and of course, those are really important to acknowledge. And I'm wondering what keeps you motivated to keep contributing to the sector.
Another story that is very special to me. You mentioned that we made in 2009 the first female blind football team in Brazil, and we went to Germany to play a tournament, and we won that tournament. Was amazing. Marta was the ambassador of the project. Was amazing, amazing, amazing. We got sponsorship in a way that no male team ever had. So was incredible. And one of the days we were going from the hotel to the gymnasium, and the person who was guiding us there was a blind guy. Was Heiner. He's a friend from Germany, and he lived in that city. So we were talking. I said, "Look, we're just talking too much. I don't know which street we are," and I tried to read the name of the street in German for him. I wasn't very successful. He said, "Look, I'll just use the cane." So we keep talking, but going by myself, I know where I am. And then and he took us with more autonomy than he had with me as a guide to the court. So the next day I spoke to him. We made a note with so yeah, after 3 streets you go to the right, and then just he gave the instructions for the blind to get from the hotel to the court. And we told the team, said, "Look, now you bring your canes, you go by yourselves. Here are the instructions how to go." And for the girls, that was they said, "Look, the blind guys in here, they have such independence, and they can go everywhere by themselves. This is amazing." And one of the girls, she was saying, "Look, back in Rio, to go from my house to the bus stop, I always need help because there's these stairs that don't have protection, so there's a big cliff on the side. And but once I get the bus, I can go to the whole city, but I always need someone. This is tricky. The guys in here, they don't need that." And I don't know, maybe less than 6 months after the trip, she moved from that place and she went somewhere that she could go to the bus stop by herself. And once she was saying that that experience going to Germany was instrumental for her to not be happy at her house, because sometimes there's a friend who says on the trainings of the commentary, that's when you are blind many times you don't know that you don't know something. Knowing that in those projects and some actions that I did, I was showing something that people didn't know that they didn't know, like giving those kind of access for them, because she moved, she did uh, the decision and so on. But if she didn't have the information, and when projects can provide that, it's, I think that is the best are the best moments of the work that I do.
Gabriel, what is next for you? 2023. I know you mentioned to me, you're thinking about different locations, different countries, different work opportunities. What are you looking forward to?
I want to move back to Europe and work with projects and try to help projects to design better structure and better actions, and bridging this gap between North and South. So this, I think that is the challenge that I'm seeking, and I feel that I will be able to contribute the most.
Now that we know more about our guest's career journey, the rest of our conversation will allow us to have some fun and get to know our guest on a personal level through some rapid fire questions. We'll then start to wrap up with pointed questions focused on advice and how our listeners can transform interest into action. Enjoy the rest of the conversation. Gabriel, what is your favorite food?
Brazilian barbecue, Japanese food as well.
And there's some good Japanese food in Sao Paulo, right?
Yeah, São Paulo has one of the biggest Japanese colonies in the world. So we have a neighborhood that is kind of the center of this colony, and you have amazing restaurants in here.
Yeah, I think your friend took me there. It was really nice. Which cities have you lived in, and in which city do you feel the most alive?
Well, so I lived in Rio de Janeiro, then I went to Hereford in England, then back to Rio, then Leuven in Belgium, then Olomouc in the Czech Republic, back to Rio, then Tralee in Ireland, then São Paulo in Brazil. So, well, São Paulo and Rio, I think that we have Carnival, we have all the culture, so it's an easy reply. But the longest I spent was abroad, was in Tralee, and it is in the countryside of Ireland, and it taught me so much about life and balance of life and work and quality of life.
Who is your football player? Who is the one to you?
Well, I'll tell you the most important won't be the obvious choice, because he's a huge friend of mine as well. Anderson Diaz. When I was working at Resi, he was the president of Resi. He's a blind football player, and he was Paralympic champion in 2004 in Greece. So yeah, if I think about a football player, would be him, not the famous footballer, but yeah, Anderson Diaz is an amazing person. How he took and his path of life, how he used sports and the opportunity that he had to be at the national team, and to find scholarship, and to change the reality of his family.
Gabrielle, what advice do you have for someone who really wants to break into the sport for development sector?
There's one particular thing that a little bit we laugh about it, but is important. Is that in the beginning of the show, I was speaking that I was a terrible goalkeeper, and then I started to help the coach, which is true. And how funny it would be if I was a good goalkeeper, we wouldn't have this show. But it was also humbling because I didn't go to work in sports for development. I didn't go to help blind people. I went to play football with my friends. And more than that, I was the worst in the team. So, in a way, like specifically about people with disabilities, it's very rare to see a professional understanding that they're living in with a disability. They know a lot. There's a lot of knowledge that not always you have in the books, in the conferences, and so on. So understanding that my position was not of a professional that will take knowledge or will do good or will do anything like this was very important for me. So just another anecdote. At some point around 2011, so I was for 10 years working with them. When I had 6 years, I managed to have the sponsorship of one of the biggest sports brands in Brazil. It's a national brand, but in some sports they compete with Nike. So they started to sponsor us, and they basically said, "Look, we have these equipments. You can choose whatever you want." And I was telling Anderson, who I just spoke, uh, uh, that I wanted to ask some small bags that you put the shoes, the sports shoes in it, and you can have the keys and so on. So because when we go to the matches, all the hotel keys are given to the coach, and then we don't know whose is whose. I said, so yeah, let's have this small bag that you hold in your hand for all the players. And then Anderson said, "Look, Gabriel, what you want? You want to make our life a misery?" I said, "No, like I just had this sponsorship. I can ask anything. How? Why you're saying that?" And I said, "Look, one hand will be either with the holding the cane or another person's arm. If you give me something to hold with the other hand, then I won't be able to touch and interact with anything. So I need a hand free."
Okay.
And then I was like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." And
Yeah.
then we had the gym bags that you hold in the shoulders just with a string. It's very humbling because 10 years on, I didn't know the needs completely, and it was amazing to have Anderson taking the decisions and being in charge as the president and being part of the decision, because yeah, I would have a very poor decision making in that moment if I was alone, if I was trying to do good for them or any group. And this applies as well what all we spoke about north south. So having people together and being humble that you don't have the answers by yourself. This is very important for me because I always think about the gym bag, like when I was writing something at the UN, is like, yeah, is this another gym bag situation? So it's tough because it's easy to, because you, like, I was talking about the projects, but sometimes I don't know that I don't know things as well. So being aware to what you don't know and respecting other knowledges, these working in such a diversity that you'll find in the field, for me is key. Perhaps it's not a very sharp and concise advice, but was my experience and things that I try to keep in mind constantly because it's easy to forget.
How can our audience support you or your work moving forward?
Well, I think that we can always connect. We can have good conversations. Like I'll be happy to connect with the audience to understand how this experience can become a research. Perhaps we do have a few organizations in Latin America that are exchanging a lot of knowledge from the Urasi experience to applying their realities and to create their own organization. So yeah, I'm open to connect, and I don't think that there's a one size fits all.
Great. Well, if you write an autobiography and if there's an English translation, I will definitely read it. And even if it's just in Portuguese, I'll find a way. So yeah, your life journey and all the journeys of those who you've interacted with is really something special, Gabrielle. And that leads me to my final question today, which I love to ask all of my amazing guests. And you gave me permission to ask you to answer in Portuguese with a little English translation. Who or what inspires you?
There's a quote that I once read from Ana Mosa. She's now the minister. Just recently this year, she started as Minister of Sport in Brazil. And once in a magazine, in an interview, she said, "Se não está bom para todo mundo, não tá bom para mim. And if it's not good for everyone, it is and good for me." And I think that it drives me to try to tackle inequalities and lack of opportunities. So it inspires me to do my share to get things moving in the right direction, to a more positive direction, and to have people with more rights, more possibilities of enjoying life with more respect, more, yeah, more quality of life.
Mm. Well, thank you. Thank you, Gabrielle, for your time, your inspiration, your advice, and I'm wishing you all the best moving forward.
Oh, thank you a lot to you for not only for this conversation, but earlier this week we were speaking how great it is to be part of this project as someone who likes to know histories and to create engagement through histories and personal bonding. A project like this is amazing. So kudos to you, and congratulations is an amazing document for the sector.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Inspira Podcast with Erika Mueller-Chen. I really hope you enjoyed the episode and found it useful. Be sure to check out the show notes for links and resources. Specifically, my LinkTree is there with tons of awesome information. Feel inspired to take action today? I've got 3 action steps you can take right now because you know your girl likes calls to action and the number 3. So here goes. Number 1, follow the podcast on your chosen podcast platform. Number 2, share your feedback with me through the listener survey listed on that Linktree. And number 3, tell just one friend about this podcast so they can give it a listen too. And do I have any overachievers out there? I've got a bonus action step, which is to consider supporting me and making sure this passion project prospers. So, number 4, follow the link to buy me a coffee. That would be pretty amazing. Until next time, stay inspired.